I absolutely love it when someone is so complimentary of the place in which they live.
Los visitantes de Asunción pienso que no deben perderse un lugar muy tradicional, muy histórico, muy exuberante en Asunción, que es el Mercado 4. Hay partes del centro histórico que son muy lindos de conocer, como el Palacio de López, la Manzana de la Ribera. Hay que hacer las visitas guiadas a la Chacarita, un barrio muy antiguo de Asunción, y también los barrios más modernos, como el Viamoa, el Carmelita.
Cynthia is the owner of my Airbnb and knows Asunción very well. It seems like every day I'm here in Asunción, I discover something new and grow to like this place even more. There are a lot of different neighborhoods, each with its own character and each with its own appeal. In the next few minutes, I'll take you to some of the areas of the city and show you what various parts of it look like. I'll have everything from the city center to some very modern sections to the first neighborhood, where people have lived since the 1700s. From my perspective, the most interesting area of Asunción is that oldest neighborhood. It's called Chacarita and covers a good bit of land near Asunción Bay. It has a reputation for being a bit dangerous and not a place that tourists need to go. Chaka Tours is trying to change that. I spent a morning as Christian led a group of us through the neighborhood. Will, who has lived in the city for several years, came along to interpret.
And the Chacarita is he calls it the genesis of Paraguay, of Asunción, where the kind of Paraguay entity started through the fusion of Spanish fathers and indigenous mothers.
One aspect of the Chacarita neighborhood that is impossible to ignore is all of the street art. It is spread pretty evenly through the streets and on the sides of buildings. Some commemorates those who have helped shape the community, some is just there to provide color and beauty. There is a goal here to create about 1,000 murals on the walls through the neighborhood. That would mean that this would become one of the capitals of street art in all of South America. Christian and Will say that there are about 75 of that goal of 1,000 pieces of art in place already. Walking around, it seems as though there are many more murals than that. Steps have been taken to make some of the murals more inclusive.
The plaque, you can see it's got braille and also got QR codes that you can go into, and there's sign language videos.
Somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 individuals live in Chacarita. Most are indigenous people. It is said to be the poorest part of the city. The Chaka Tours project is designed to help those who live here.
So Christian says Chaka Tours is a project that kind of comes from the people from the neighborhood as a way of sharing their experiences, and mostly to challenge the stigmatization and criminalization of the neighborhood.
Music and art should be of benefit with that. Christian played music along the way that was composed with the neighborhood in mind. Slowly, the art seemed to be making a difference.
And he says that currently it's a bohemian neighborhood, but like any other neighborhood in Latin America, it has certain problems.
Changes are evident. We passed by a project to build new homes for 56 families to move them into a better living situation. It's called Chacarita Alta. Other elements are being added too. This is now a place for the community and its residents. This was a private home which has now been converted into public space. It's essentially a cultural center. Already some events have been held here. There is the potential for concerts and exhibitions of all sorts. The hope is this is just the beginning.
The idea is for there to be a series of projects around it as ways of encouraging entrepreneurship.
There are still problems, of course. The lower part of the neighborhood is prone to flooding, and gangs and drugs are prevalent in some locations. The tour did not go through the entire community to avoid some of those trouble areas. Ultimately, though, Chaka Tours and the work it is leading can benefit all of Chacarita.
The goal of the project is to strengthen the circular economy of the neighborhood.
If you go to Asunción, I would strongly recommend spending time with Chaka Tours. My home for the month in Asunción was the Las Mercedes neighborhood. The location was excellent, right in between the city center and the more modern areas farther to the east. I didn't use public transportation to get around. Ubers were always available and they were quite inexpensive. Las Mercedes is an older neighborhood, but one which has new elements and plenty of construction taking place today.
Muy tradicional, que fusiona la parte arquitectónica antigua con lo moderno.
That mix can be quite appealing as it provides a vision of what Asunción was and what it is becoming.
Porque lo antiguo nos invita a pensar en visiones del pasado, a imaginarnos cómo fue antes. Y lo nuevo nos rememora un poco el presente.
Las Mercedes has many houses and apartment buildings. Then scattered amongst those residential properties are restaurants, cafes, and shops. One of the places I liked the most was the Textilia complex. This was a factory and now has been transformed into a creative hub. That includes cafes, small companies, workspaces, and more. There is even a small science museum. There was a small charge to enter, but it was an appealing experience. The current exhibit was all about bugs and insects. Finely detailed photographs were the highlight for me. It took hundreds, if not thousands, of individual images to create each of these large format pieces. The Textilia complex is technically in the Jara neighborhood, but right on the edge of Las Mercedes. Since I stayed here, this is the part of town where I hung out the most. I went to the Totem Cafe many times. Most every time, I grabbed a cappuccino. There are 4 or 5 coffee shops in Las Mercedes that are an easy walk from where I'm staying. I like them all, but this one has become my favorite. The Totem Cafe was like a laboratory. Staff was always working in the back, seemingly intent on constantly improving the beverages that they provided to customers. Not only was the coffee delicious, but the people were incredibly gracious and kind. The Airbnb in which I stayed was one of my favorites ever. My apartment was 2 floors and gave me all of the space I needed. Even better was the complex, complete with a pool, a small workout room, workspaces, and a garden that was spectacular. There is room for several different guests in the complex.
Este espacio es como un oasis en medio de la ciudad, como ya lo describen algunos huéspedes. Más que un espacio verde solamente, es un espacio para reconectarse con uno mismo.
If I ever return to Asunción, this is where I want to stay. I'll pick up the pace as I run through a few other parts of the city. The more modern neighborhoods, several kilometers to the east of the center, have essentially become the new downtown. Take a look at Las Lomas. There are numerous impressive shopping centers in Asunción, but the best I experienced was the Paseo de Galeria. This mall is astonishing. There are 3 different levels with well over 100 various stores situated within. Many of the shops were readily recognizable Western brands. The number of places to eat, both inside the food court and attached to the perimeter of the mall, was incredible. I wasn't in the market to buy anything, but I spent a good 30 to 45 minutes just wandering around, enjoying the facility. Also in Las Lomas, I visited the Museo de Barro. There was no entry fee, and it contained numerous pieces of historic visual art. You can see where Asunción is headed in this part of the city. It seems like many of the buildings within the landscape are new, and more are being constructed every day. Recoleta is definitely on the list of the best neighborhoods in Asunción. There is another mall called Shopping Mariscal that is extremely impressive. It has several levels of shops and restaurants. Before I came to Paraguay, I didn't imagine that these types of facilities would be so modern and appealing. On the day I stopped by, they even had a separate little market operating in one of the parking areas. Each of the neighborhoods includes plazas in which people can relax and quite often buy items from vendors who have set up there for the day. A different sort of experience is available at La Cuadrita. It's a small area. It only extends for a block, but there are 6 or 7 restaurants here and other places to drink. Really cool. I like the concept. Just have a short section of a street blocked off to traffic and give those who visit a selection of places to buy items or get something to eat or drink. Like nearly all of Asunción, the plentiful greenery added so much to the atmosphere. Of course, I ambled into a coffee shop while I was in Recoleta. This is the Mocha Cafe. I grabbed a drink and just enjoyed the space. The cappuccino is flavorful, and this place is quite appealing. It's all very comfortable, and it's much like this entire part of the city. This would have been a perfect place to bring the laptop, order a drink, and knock out some work for an hour or two. On the same day, I went to what is considered the top neighborhood in the city, Viamoa. Here, you find the same enticing apartment buildings which are found throughout this part of Asunción. Numerous places exist too for entertainment and nourishment. I went to Bar Leo for lunch. I initially ordered a papa relleno, which is a potato pie with meat in the middle, but they were out of that already. This is another part of the menu of the day. It is baked chicken with potatoes and onions and some spaghetti on the side. Maybe not unique to Paraguay, but still looks pretty good. The chicken was tender, the potatoes were good, and the caramelized onions were special. The spaghetti on the side was a great accompaniment. As good as the food was the outdoor space in which I was able to savor the meal. After wandering around the neighborhood a bit more, I stopped into Frida Helados. There, the phenomenal owners dished up a couple of scoops of ice cream for me. One is burukuya, which is a tropical fruit, and the other is cocada, which is coconut and chocolate. Both are very good. Burukuya is similar to passion fruit. It was tasty, but the cocada, a mix of coconut and chocolate, was easily my favorite. Before I left Viamoa, I stopped by Plaza Olímpica, hoping to find a park befitting the quality of the neighborhood. I have been disappointed by the parks throughout Asunción. I had high hopes for this one because of its location, but it too looks like it could use quite a bit of work. All of the parks seem to be suffering from neglect to a large degree. As an addendum, I did finally discover a really nice park a couple of kilometers from the city center. Parque Carlos Antonio Lopez was just what you want. Plenty of green space, nice facilities, and lots of people who appreciate it. I spent time traveling to numerous other neighborhoods to see what they were like. A lot of the top neighborhoods get that designation because they're great places to stay or live. They all look sort of the same though, but I'm going to check out 3 of them today by going to 3 cafes in 3 different neighborhoods. I'm going to start off right here in Via Aurelia. As expected, Via Aurelia was a pleasant place. The coffee shop I visited was Carmelo. There, I drank a hot chocolate and relished the attractive space. On the walk through the neighborhood, I found a nice sports complex. I also came upon another shopping complex. Not as fancy as the other 2 sites I've mentioned, but what was called the Shopping Multiplaza looked like a fantastic place for residents in the vicinity to shop. Next door on the tour this day was the neighborhood of Los Laureles. Here, there were the same tree-lined streets, homes, and apartment buildings. My coffee shop destination was called God's Pan. Pan in Spanish means bread. I downed a cappuccino in what was more of a restaurant attached to a service station than a neighborhood coffee house. I'm going to call that coffee shop Los Laureles adjacent. It was actually outside of the boundaries of the neighborhood, but I looked on Google Maps and really could find nothing within Los Laureles. This area was quite pleasant, but there wasn't a whole lot more than the housing, at least along the path that I took. With little more to hold my attention, I moved on. Nazareth was the final destination to visit on this day. There were a few more businesses in this area along the nice streets with good houses. The coffee shop I chose was the Valesca Cafe. There I deviated from my regular cappuccino or chocolate order. I have been wanting to try mate, which is one of, if not the most popular drink here in Paraguay. I found a version of it here. This is called coquito. Mate is generally bitter. It's like a tea. This, however, has been sweetened, and the taste is quite good. A viewer told me in the comments after my most recent video that coquita and beiju combine for the breakfast eaten each day by many Paraguayans. The biggest market in Asunción is Marcato Municipal number 4. I'm speaking of neighborhoods, and this market is so expansive that it is essentially a neighborhood all its own. No matter where I go, it's always of interest to walk through the places where locals go to shop. The city's main market was relocated to this spot in the 1940s. It is technically situated mainly in the Pederasi neighborhood, but is so large that it extends into 3 others. It's absolutely essential that you visit the city center when in Asunción. There are lots of statues and historic sites. I particularly enjoyed the Independence House Museum. The same was true for the Pantheon of Heroes. There are other attractions too. I love the Manzana de la Rivera, which is a multifaceted cultural center. Along with art and museum space, the Casa Clary Cafe gives one of the best views of the governmental palace that you can find. Also, it's worth a short walk to the small neighborhood of Loma San Jeronimo. The artwork on the walls of the buildings, as well as the painted steps, are quite the attraction. Otherwise, try to make it to the center on a day when there is a street party. This was such a fun event. It included music, and that encouraged people to take the opportunity to dance in the street. There was also a competition or demonstration, I'm not sure which, that included women balancing stacks of wine bottles on their heads. I never saw anyone drop a single bottle. And the food during the fair, what I had was wonderful. One last spot to mention is the Costanera. That is a lengthy promenade which allows for travel along the Bay of Asunción. It is a tremendous spot to get exercise and enjoy the beauty of the natural side of the city. With all of its different elements, Asunción just might be a place that you'll want to visit. It is much more laid back than many South American cities, and especially South American capitals.
Es una ciudad calmada, con pocos edificios altos, con mucha vegetación. Y creo que los extranjeros especialmente se sienten bien acogidos por la gente que es muy cálida.
If you come to Asunción, you will find a place that fits with your personality and what you like to do. It is definitely a place that should draw more visitors than it does. For me, my time here in Paraguay is about over. I'll head out in a couple of days for Bolivia and a month-long stay in La Paz. Come back to see how I handle the extreme elevation there. Thank you for watching Old, Alone, and Far From Home.